The air inside the cave is thick with the heavy, cloying scent of wet fur and the sharp, metallic tang of wood smoke, but all you can feel is the rhythmic, grinding pressure deep in your lower back. It is a dull, pulsing heat, a sensation like a slow-motion tectonic shift occurring inside your own pelvis. Every few minutes, a wave of cold sweat breaks across your forehead, contrasting with the sweltering heat of the fire pit nearby. You are crouched on a bed of dried ferns and soft moss, feeling the weight of your own body become a foreign, impossible burden. For a modern person, this would be a moment of absolute, clinical panic, but for the woman living 50,000 years ago, this sensory overload was the expected threshold of a transformation. You are about to do the one thing your body was never actually designed to do in isolation. In the animal kingdom, birth is often a solitary, quiet event, a creature slipping away into the brush to emerge hours later with a clean, shivering offspring. But for a human, that silence is a death sentence. We are a biological paradox, a species that traded easy birth for big brains and upright walking, creating a narrow gateway that should have logically ended our lineage before it even began. Why did we survive a design flaw that kills so many other species? The most common story we tell ourselves about our ancestors is a lie of rugged individualism. We picture the lone cave woman, a primal, stoic figure who wanders away from the tribe to give birth by a quiet river, squatting in the grass and returning to camp an hour later with a baby strapped to her back as if nothing happened. This image is deeply embedded in our pop culture understanding of the Paleolithic, portraying ancient humans as more animal-like, and therefore more capable of handling raw biological processes without help. However, the archaeological record and the study of modern hunter-gatherer societies tell a diametrically opposed story. If an ancient woman had tried to do it alone, she likely wouldn't have made it back to the tribe at all. The mortality rate for unassisted human birth is staggering compared to almost any other mammal. Our infants are born half-baked, with massive skulls that must navigate a convoluted, twisting birth canal that is barely wide enough to accommodate them. This wasn't a process ancient humans just got through by being tougher. It was a crisis they solved through the invention of the world's first social technology. Could it be that the very thing that makes us human isn't our tools, but our inability to be born alone? To understand the sheer scale of the problem ancient humans faced, we have to look at the obstetrical dilemma, a term coined in 1960 by the anthropologist Sherwood Washburn. It is a biological stalemate that defines our species. Roughly 6 million years ago, our ancestors began walking on two legs, which required a radical narrowing and reshaping of the pelvis to support an upright posture. This change was great for long-distance running, but it turned the birth canal into a tight, irregular tube. Then, about 2 million years ago, our brains began to explode in size. We were trying to fit an increasingly large object through an increasingly narrow and twisted hole. Most primates have a straight shot. The baby's head enters the pelvis and exits in the same orientation. In humans, the baby has to perform a complex series of rotations, entering sideways, turning midway, and exiting facing the mother's back. This internal rotation is so physically demanding that it often requires external assistance to ensure the baby doesn't get stuck or the mother doesn't suffer catastrophic internal tearing. Washburn's research suggests that this dilemma forced humans to evolve a unique social trait, obligate midwifery. We didn't just choose to help each other, we were biologically coerced into it. How did our ancestors navigate a design flaw that should have ended us in a single generation? This pressure created the role of the specialist long before the invention of the wheel or the plow. In 2014, researchers analyzing the remains of a Neanderthal woman found evidence of skeletal wear that suggested she had lived a long, arduous life, but more importantly, the community had clearly cared for her through multiple injuries. In various Paleolithic sites across Europe, we see a pattern in the burials of older women. These women weren't just survivors, they were repositories of data. Anthropologists like Karen Rosenberg have argued that the first medical professionals weren't shamans or bone setters, but midwives. These were women who had witnessed dozens, perhaps hundreds, of births. They knew the subtle signs of a baby positioned the wrong way. They knew how to use their hands to guide a head through that twisting canal or how to apply pressure to the lower back to relieve the back labor caused by a baby's skull pressing against the mother's spine. They were the masters of a secret, oral curriculum of anatomy and physics that was passed down through gestures and stories over tens of thousands of years. If these specialists were the backbone of the tribe, what specific techniques were they using to beat the odds? The ancient toolkit for pregnancy didn't involve scalpels, but it was far from primitive. It was grounded in a deep, experimental knowledge of phytochemistry, the use of plants as medicine. When we look at the dental calculus, the hardened plaque on the teeth of ancient remains, we find a pharmaceutical map of the prehistoric world. Researchers at the Autonomous University of Barcelona have found traces of medicinal plants in the teeth of individuals from the Paleolithic that have no nutritional value but are known for their sedative or labor-inducing properties. For example, the use of Achillea millefolium, or yarrow, has been documented in ancient contexts. It contains alkaloids that can help slow heavy bleeding, a primary killer in childbirth. They used willow bark, which contains salicin, a precursor to aspirin, to manage the grueling pain of long labors. They weren't just guessing, they were practicing a refined form of botany. A midwife 50,000 years ago would have known exactly which root to grind into a paste to stimulate contractions and which leaf to brew into a tea to keep a mother from drifting into shock. These weren't just folk remedies, they were the results of thousands of years of trial and error that actually worked. But what happened when the plants weren't enough to bridge the gap between life and death? Beyond the medicine, the ancient world understood the physics of birth better than many modern hospitals did until quite recently. For the vast majority of human history, women did not give birth lying on their backs. That position, while convenient for a doctor to see what's happening, is a nightmare for the mother's physiology. It forces her to push uphill against gravity and narrows the pelvic opening by up to 30%. Ancient humans knew better. Archaeological evidence, including small clay figurines from the Vinca culture and cave paintings, suggests that the standard birthing positions were squatting, kneeling, or using a birthing stool made of stones or logs. These positions allow the pelvis to expand to its maximum width and let gravity do the heavy lifting. The midwives of the tribe would act as physical anchors, letting the laboring woman lean her full weight against them, creating a human support structure. This wasn't just a physical act, it was a psychological one. The presence of trusted, experienced women lowered the mother's stress hormones, like cortisol, which can actually stall labor. By creating a cocoon of safety, the tribe was literally hacking the mother's endocrine system to make the birth faster and safer. If gravity and plants were the tools, who was the real engine of survival behind the scenes? This leads us to one of the most powerful theories in evolutionary biology, the grandmother hypothesis. Proposed by researcher Kristen Hawkes after studying the Hadza people of Tanzania, this theory asks why human females are one of the only species on Earth to live long past their reproductive years. In almost every other animal, once you can't have babies, you die. But human grandmothers provide a massive evolutionary advantage. In ancient times, a grandmother wasn't just a sentimental figure, she was a specialized labor force. She was the one who gathered the extra calories needed to feed a pregnant woman who could no longer forage effectively. She was the one who took care of the older toddlers, ensuring they didn't wander off or starve while the mother was focused on the newborn. Hawkes found that in groups with an active grandmother, the survival rate of infants skyrocketed. This cooperative breeding meant that a human pregnancy wasn't the burden of one woman, but the project of an entire multi-generational team. The grandmother was the bridge between the old knowledge and the new life, a walking encyclopedia of every complication and success the tribe had ever seen. Is it possible that the secret to our species' success isn't our hunting skills, but the tactical placement of our elders? The tribe's involvement didn't start at the moment of labor, it began the second a pregnancy was recognized. In many hunter-gatherer groups, a pregnant woman's social status shifted immediately. She wasn't sidelined, she was insulated. We see evidence in the Venus figurines, small, portable statues of pregnant women found across Europe from 35,000 years ago, that suggests a deep, almost obsessive cultural focus on the pregnant form. These weren't just fertility charms, They may have been educational tools used by midwives to explain the changes in the body or perhaps ritual markers for a woman's journey into motherhood. During these 9 months, the tribe would engage in a process of resource shifting. The best cuts of meat, the highest fat marrow, and the cleanest water were often reserved for the pregnant woman. This was a high-stakes investment. If the mother was well-nourished, the baby's brain had a better chance of developing correctly, and she would have the physical stamina to survive a labor that could last for 48 hours. The ancient world viewed a pregnant woman not as an individual with a personal condition, but as a collective vessel for the tribe's future. But if the whole tribe was invested, what happened when the outcome wasn't a celebration? Death was a constant shadow in the ancient birthing cave. Despite the plants and the midwives, the obstetrical dilemma often claimed lives. Estimates suggest that throughout prehistory, roughly 1 in 3 women might die during their reproductive years, many due to complications from birth. But how ancient humans handled these tragedies reveals their deep sophistication. We find double burials in the archaeological record, where a woman and a newborn are laid to rest together with incredible care. In a 26,000-year-old site in the Czech Republic called Dolní Věstonice, researchers found a complex burial that suggests the community didn't just move on, they mourned with ritualized precision. They used red ochre, a pigment symbolizing life and blood, to cover the bodies, and decorated them with necklaces made of mammoth ivory. These weren't just failed births to be forgotten, they were honored members of the tribe. This level of ritual suggests that the ancient world viewed the risk of pregnancy with a profound, religious gravity. They knew they were fighting a war against biology, and every loss was a collective scar. Does the way a society treats its most vulnerable moments define its true level of civilization? One of the most fascinating missing pieces of this history is the role of the father and the men of the tribe. While birth was predominantly a female-led space, the men weren't just sitting around. In many ancestral cultures, the men took on a sentinel role. Labor is loud. It involves hours of vocalization that can carry for miles across a quiet landscape, potentially attracting predators like lions or hyenas. While the women were inside the cave or the makeshift birth hut, the men would maintain a perimeter, keeping fires burning bright and staying on high alert. They were the physical shield that allowed the midwives to focus entirely on the mother. In some cultures, there were even rituals like kuvad, where the father would mimic the pains of labor or follow strict dietary taboos to share the burden of the birth. This was a way of psychologically binding the father to the infant, ensuring that he would be invested in the long, difficult years of child-rearing to come. It was a total tribe mobilization. Everyone had a job, because a single mistake could mean the loss of the next generation. Could this ancient division of labor be the origin of our modern social structures? The ancient world's approach to the umbilical cord and the placenta also shows a surprising level of medical intuition that we are only now rediscovering. In many indigenous cultures, which likely preserve ancient traditions, the umbilical cord isn't cut immediately. They wait until it stops pulsing, a practice called delayed cord clamping. This allows a final, massive bolus of oxygenated blood and stem cells to transfer from the placenta to the baby, preventing anemia and boosting the infant's iron stores for months. Modern Western medicine only started making this a standard recommendation in the last few decades, yet it was likely common practice for 200,000 years. The placenta itself was often treated with immense respect, sometimes buried in a specific location to anchor the child to the land. This wasn't just superstition, it was a way of managing a biological byproduct that could otherwise attract scavengers or cause infection if not handled correctly. The ancient midwife was a master of waste management and hygiene in a world without soap. They used fire-sterilized stone tools and clean animal hides, understanding intuitively that dirt led to the fever that killed new mothers. How many lives were saved by a simple, stone tool-wielding woman who understood the importance of a clean blade? As the labor reached its climax and the baby finally emerged, the social technology didn't stop. The first hour after birth, often called the golden hour in modern hospitals, was a frantic period of ancient engineering. The baby was immediately placed skin to skin on the mothers. This isn't just for bonding. It's a biological necessity. Skin-to-skin contact regulates the baby's body temperature, stabilizes their heart rate, and colonizes their skin with the mother's good bacteria, which builds their immune system. In a world without incubators or antibiotics, this was the baby's first line of defense. The midwives would then assist with the first breastfeeding, which provides colostrum, a liquid gold, thick with antibodies. If a mother couldn't produce milk or died in the process, the tribe had a backup, the wet nurse. Because human tribes were often made up of related females, there was almost always another lactating woman who could step in. This communal nursing is almost unique to humans and a few other highly social mammals. It meant that in the ancient world, an orphan didn't have to be a death sentence. The community was the mother. If the mother is actually the whole tribe, where does the individual end and the group begin? The recovery period, or the fourth trimester, was perhaps the most critical part of the ancient pregnancy protocol. In many traditional societies, there is a period of lying in, which can last anywhere from 30 to 40 days. During this time, the new mother is not expected to gather food, cook, or move camp. Her only job is to heal and feed the baby. This was a massive logistical challenge for a nomadic tribe on the move. It meant the entire group had to slow down, or perhaps even split up for a month, leaving a small guard with the mother while the rest of the group moved to the next seasonal camp. This willingness to sacrifice the group's overall speed for the sake of one woman's recovery is a hallmark of human evolution. It shows a high level of prosociality, the ability to care about the well-being of others at a personal cost. We see evidence of this in the leisure time of ancient humans. They weren't just working 24/7. They had the social fat in their system to support a member who was temporarily unproductive. This period of rest reduced the risk of postpartum hemorrhage and depression, ensuring the mother could eventually return to her full strength. Is our modern rush to get back to work after birth actually a violation of our deep biological history? The real reveal of the ancient world isn't that birth was natural or easy. The reveal is that humans survived because we realized, very early on, that biology is a trap. We are the only species that decided to fight back against the limits of our own bodies with the power of culture. We didn't wait for our pelvises to evolve back into a wider shape. We invented the midwife. We didn't wait for our babies to be born with more fat. We invented the communal nursery. We didn't wait for our brains to get smaller to make birth easier. We invented the medicine and the rituals to handle the bigger heads. This cultural buffering is the reason you are here today. Every single one of your ancestors was the beneficiary of a high-stakes, multi-generational support team that refused to let a biological stalemate win. We are not a species of individuals who occasionally help each other. We are a species of cooperative breeders who occasionally act as individuals. The social technology of the birthing cave is the actual foundation of everything we call civilization. Without the midwife and the grandmother, there would be no hunters, no artists, and no engineers. The real mystery isn't how we survived the danger of birth, it's why we ever thought we could do it any other way. Think back to that feeling of the tectonic shift in your pelvis, the smell of the smoke, and the heavy breathing of the women around you. In that moment, 50,000 years ago, you weren't just a body in pain, you were the center of a sophisticated, biological war room designed to ensure your success. Those women weren't just your family, they were the world's first scientists, practicing a discipline where the only peer review that mattered was the cry of a healthy newborn. They understood that in the face of a narrow birth canal and a large brain, the only way forward was together. We often look back at the Stone Age and see a time of lack of medicine, lack of comfort, lack of knowledge. But in reality, it was a time of immense social wealth. They had the time to sit for days with a laboring mother. They had the specialized knowledge of every plant in the valley. They had a social contract that was written in blood and bone, ensuring that no one went through the most dangerous moment of their life alone. That contract is still there, buried in our DNA, even if we've covered it up with sterile white walls and beeping monitors. When you look at the history of our species, the story of pregnancy isn't a story of nature taking its course. It is a story of humans looking at nature's course and saying, no, we can do better. We took the most vulnerable, terrifying moment of our existence and turned it into the ultimate team sport. We built a bridge of culture over a gap in our biology, and we've been walking across it for 300,000 years. You are the end result of an unbroken chain of women who held each other's hands, who whispered instructions in the dark, and who refused to let the obstetrical dilemma be the end of the story. You don't come from a line of people who just dealt with it. You come from a line of people who mastered it through the sheer force of their connection to one another. Every heartbeat in your chest right now is proof that the ancient system worked. You aren't just the descendant of survivors. You are the product of a 300,000-year-old support network that flatly refused to let nature dictate your ancestors' fate. The idea that you are an independent individual who made it here on your own is a convenient modern fantasy. In reality, you were a communal project before you even took your first breath, and you are only here because a group of people long ago decided that your life was worth the collective effort of the entire tribe. You are a biological impossibility that was made possible by the people standing next to you. That isn't just a heartwarming sentiment about the past, it is the fundamental, inescapable reality of your existence. You weren't born into this world, you were carried into it by a crowd. Don't ever let yourself believe you can survive it any other way.